Need a presenter? Your Event Audio has you covered. Closed circuit audio equipment with turnkey operation at your trade show booth, live event, or private event. YourEventAudio.com is the place to go. DJ services, MC talent, and a whole lot more. Check out YourEventAudio.com today.
Craving ideas to ignite your face-to-face marketing program? Join us at Exhibitor Live, the conference and exhibition for trade show and corporate event marketers in Nashville, February the 25th through the 28th. Dive into over 100 electrifying sessions and workshops led by industry rock stars, where you'll learn to skyrocket your ROI, master the art of creating experiences, and forge connections that will take your program and your career to the next level. Secure your spot now and turn your trade show dreams into reality at EXHIBITORLive.com.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the Exhibitor Now Podcast, our first edition for 2024 as we kick off a brand new year. I remember this a year ago, Mark. We were sitting here saying, let's go into the podcast realm, rather, and we did. And, of course, you see Mark Johnson there joining me from his home in Las Vegas now. A much better, interesting climate as opposed to the winters in Minnesota. Heck, I know because I'm here in Atlanta and it's freezing cold. So I'm sure it might be a little chilly, but it's a whole heck of a lot better than what you would be experiencing in Minnesota right now.
Yeah, it has been. There's a lot of reasons that we've moved here. We did just open up our facility for Star as we are creating a Vegas operation. It is going to continue to be more of my home base. As you said, the climate is better, not only from a weather climate, but I have to say from a business or tax base, it also helps. So there's a lot of reasons to do this, but it's really, it makes sense for us to be here for opening up the new business. But I will tell you, it's hard for me to say it's cool. I took the dog for a walk last night and we actually got hailed on as a cold front quick move through the desert. Wow. And so there was a little cloud burst that came through and it was interesting. I didn't expect that here in Vegas, but it was fun.
Yeah, I've done a few shows in Vegas where, you have weather and then in a split second, it changes quickly. I remember specifically walking across that bridge between New York, and Excalibur. And I believe it was an exhibitor show. It may have been some other show that was happening, but I remember walking across the bridge and the wind gusts that came up in a matter of seconds were literally and physically blowing people over and they're off their feet. So yeah, I've been there before. I've seen it, and so be careful out there with those weather changes.
You just have to work on when do you hit the golf ball up in the air and let the wind take it, or when do you hit a low screamer?
Good analogy. Speaking of Vegas, of course, this is our pre-CES show week with a lot going on, from star-studded celebrities like T-Pain, Howie Mandel, Mark Cuban, and the Wu-Tang Clan, who will all be at CES next week, to of course, the expected tsunami of AI experiences, flying cars, and the like. So, Mark, it should be one for the record books. And of course, the Exhibitor Group editorial staff from Exhibitor Magazine will be on hand to give us a little bit of a play-by-play action of that.
Yeah, I was actually on the show floor yesterday as the setup has started here, and you're starting to see some of the exhibits going up, and the size of them and the number of them are, incredible. So I do think it's going to be a record year in a lot of areas. And as you said, those topics are going to be AI is going to be off the charts. We've already seen some talk about the flying cars. So it is always a great indicator of where the world is going, and we're excited about it. Yeah, our staff will be here to cover it from Exhibitor Magazine, and we'll make sure we've got the information for our listeners and then also for our readers and subscribers.
Absolutely. I have to be honest, I'm one of those people that have yet to walk the show floor at CES. Maybe 25 will be that time that I do that. But I'm one of those people looking forward to hearing the feedback from what happens at the show. Interesting in the news this week, everybody in our industry and anything related to design knows of the company CANVA. Everybody knows about them. Everyone, any kind of DIY design is familiar with the online graphic design startup, and liquidity is at the top of the conversation with them. The software company is looking to secure a secondary sale that would permit longtime employees and investors to sell over $1 billion in stock. The goal is to give investors the opportunity to cash out while giving some new investors a chance to get in. Lord knows CANVA is a hot item right now, and its potential deal adds to a growing trend, Mark, of private tech firms looking to create liquidity options for their stakeholders. So you're in that company acquiring world, quote unquote. What are your thoughts on this one?
If you're looking at what they're trying to accomplish, they truly are. They've had people invested for a long period of time. And where can they get some of the money out? How can they get some of the liquidity? Some people want to get out totally and move on, or they're at a stage in life that they need to get the cash out. But there's others that just, and my guess here is there's some of the real key investors, some of the larger ones that are stepping in and saying that. And so they needed to do something to help support that. It's not unusual. It doesn't scare me or anything. Like you said, I look at it as an opportunity. Now it's a chance for a few of us that aren't in, maybe to want to get in and carry it for a period of time. And it's just normal business. We all need capital to keep moving forward and expanding and growing with that. So I think it makes good sense. And I will be taking a look at the opportunity to buying in.
Yeah, it sounds like it's don't lay your hat to rest permanently anywhere. I mean, it's that type of investment trend is ride it for a while and then know when to not hold on to it and get rid of it. But it's just interesting that that concept of putting in design mechanisms to make design a lot easier from an AI standpoint, and all of the bells and whistles that it has. And I truly believe this one, Mark, that it's going to continue to develop. It's a developing stage, and it will get even better and better as you go along, which obviously should attract more investors like yourself. Maybe I could even play in that game where we could throw some dollars that way and capitalize on that.
No, I think it's something to look at. And you're right. This does create an opportunity for them to add to their products and services. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Finally, before we get into our political interview for this week, it's just funny how politics comes to mind in 2024, seems to be the key word there. The national debt is in the forefront of the news. The national debt has surged past $34 trillion, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. This is the first time ever that it has eclipsed that mark. Now, it was just $33 trillion back in September. So that's an additional trillion in a quarter. Think about that. Now, of course, the blame lies with higher interest rates, lower tax revenue, and increased spending since the start of the pandemic. And while some analysts note the rising debt is tempered by strong economic growth, the number raises concerns as funding showdowns loom in Congress. Of course, we got to think about the January, February deadlines that are coming up, right? So lawmakers will again be under pressure to avoid shutting down parts of the federal government. This is becoming a trend, Mark. And how does it affect us? Does it affect us? But it affects us all in a way, because now the individual amount of money it would take per person to pay that debt off is so astronomical that it's silly almost, but it does carry a negative connotation to it.
Yeah, it does. And you and I have talked about this a little bit. And one of my questions to you as we started the conversation was, I wanted to see how this compares to the rest of the world. And national debt is one thing, but it's really how it then ties to, your GDP, your gross domestic product, and where that gives you your ability to pay the debt off. So I think that's something we always have to keep an eye on for it. But the basic data that I could find, there isn't anything recently that ties right to what you just, stated to the numbers that just came out. We're in the top group of, indebted countries. So that is something that can be concerned about and work on it. And we have to take care of our place at home here to make sure we're still competitive and the best place to be for business and for our livelihood. But I will tell you, when I look at some of the data, we're by far not the worst off. So there's a lot of other countries out there, and large Japan, Greece, Italy, that are really struggling with the same thing. The United Kingdom and Germany is also in that area. So I think there's some element to it that we all hope we'd get a better plan and how we can move forward with managing this issue, solving this problem, and handling it. But to me, it's not a doom and gloom, go into the basement and put my head in the sand, life's over. But it is something that I think the message, hopefully, Washington hears with election year coming up, something very key that we have to figure out how we're going to manage our funds better. You and I've talked about it, and it's been true for years. If we ran our businesses like this, we would have been out of business years ago, and bankrupt and that stuff, or our home checking accounts. Nobody would give us any credit if this is the way we ran our household. So hopefully Washington can learn from that. Hopefully we can come up with some solid plans going forward. I don't think we and most of our listeners, our generation, are going to like some of the answers, because it's going to be changing some of the trust laws and how you can pass any kind of wealth that you have to the next generation. There's some new tax laws that are changing here quick, and I can see it being in favor of the government and not so much in favor of the individuals. But unfortunately, that's probably one of the few options they're going to have to paying off this debt.
The pendulum swings, and it is constantly swinging, and a lot of times we don't see it swing back the other way. You're right there. And the other thing I was thinking while you were talking about that is the top 10 idea is usually a positive aspect of where you want to be and what you want to achieve, but being the top 10 in this one is not where you want to be. So hopefully we can find a better solution moving forward than what we're sitting in right now, right?
Yep, that's correct.
So I mentioned political. Politics are part of the game, and we do have a fellow that Mark and I talk to a lot. Of course, we have our own show that's separate from this one, from the exhibitor group, known as the Association Focus Podcast. That next show comes up on January the 18th. Hopefully by then, some new legislation will have passed, especially in regards to the Pell Grant and the funding of trade schools and other types of education outside of the four-year college. We'll be talking with Tommy Goodwin, who is the executive director of the ECA, the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, about the agenda, the political agenda for ECA going into 2024. It's a lot of things to talk about. So let's take a quick break and come back and have a discussion with Tommy Goodwin here on the Exhibitor Now podcast. It comes up next after this.
Attention, trade show and event marketing professionals. Are you ready to take your face-to-face marketing expertise to the next level? Join more than 3,000 candidates currently enrolled in Exhibitor Group's Certified Trade Show Marketer Program. CTSM is corporate America's top source of the industry's best trade show and corporate event training. CTSM certified trade show marketers enjoy expanded career opportunities, greater respect and authority in their organizations, and earn higher salaries than their acronym-free peers. Learn more, earn more. Visit ctsm.com today. Welcome back to the Exhibitor Now podcast. Welcome to 2024, as we said on the front end of the show. I can't think of a better way to start our podcast for 24 than to examine where we are from a political standpoint, a political set of eyes looking at what we could talk about. We spent a lot of time, especially in the second half of 2023, here with the Exhibitor Group, especially formulating the new podcast known as the Association Focus Podcast, which is co-hosted by myself, Mark Johnson, and our guest today for Exhibitor Now, and that's Tommy Goodwin, who is absolutely no stranger to Exhibitor Group, Exhibitor Now, and the Association Focus, as I mentioned. He is the Executive Vice President of ECA, the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. And just earlier this week, ECA released their public policy agenda for moving forward in 2024. So we're going to kind of break that down a little bit. And there's no better person to have on the show than the person who crafted that, and that would be Tommy Goodwin. So Tommy, Happy New Year. Here we go again as we go into year 2 of our podcast, and not year 2 for ECA, but let's start out with that just as an off the subject thing. From beginning, when I was at Don and Mike and we had conversations about ECA to where we're at today,
how would you grade ECA's performance, efforts, activities? I would give it an A+, but I'd like to hear that from you.
What a good question to start the year with, Mike. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all the listeners of the Exhibitor Now podcast. Thanks for leaving the drawbridge down for me and letting me come and chat about what we're up to in ECA world. You know, I don't know how I would give us a letter grade in terms of what we've done. You know, we've obviously, we've helped out with some of the small business. We helped out with some of the reopening during the pandemic. We're working on a lot of workforce and international issues. But I will say what heartens me the most about it is the opportunities to come on and talk to you and have folks throughout the industry who are aware of what we're doing. To me, that means we're becoming part of the culture and part of the DNA of the business events industry. And that, to me, is what matters the most, because it's not about what ECA has done in its first 3 years. It's about setting something up that's going to be around for the next 23 or 33 years and representing everybody who's listening to this podcast and the entire industry. So if we're laying the foundation for that, we're racking up some wins on the way. I'll be a happy camper, but as everybody in this industry knows, the reward for doing good work is the opportunity to do more good work, and that's, I guess, what we're here to talk about today.
As you answered that, it made me think, and I kind of use this as my segue into our first talking point. Culture and the past, quote unquote, the way we used to do things. Because me asking you about a letter grade is so 1960s, 70s, 80s that we just kind of stick with that. And it's kind of verbiage. It's kind of how we grade things, just for lack of better words. And a letter grade is the first thing that comes to mind, but how we grade is actually changed. How we're moving forward in our industries and ours, trade show, live event, experiential, has also changed. The foundation of how we think has changed. Everything about it has changed. And the first of the couple of things we'll talk about that we talked off mic about is right at the top of that list, and that's the workforce. How it has changed, how it has been perceived prior to 2020, 2021 through 23, and now 24. But the activities of ECA and what they've done to push our workforce are right there at the top of the list of the agenda, the policy agenda of how you're going to move forward, I would imagine, for 2024.
I've said for a couple of years that, workforce was going to be the future of ECA. Well, it's the future of ECA and it's also the present, right? Because I think if anything we have learned over the last couple of years, it's the workforce challenges and the gaps and the need to bring the next generation in that we saw manifest themselves in 2021. Some people, I think, thought they were going to be a blip. It's very clear. It's reality. It's here. It's today. It's tomorrow. It's the future. And ECA is going to be laser focused on this issue in 2024. I'm sure we're going to be in 2025 and 2030 and beyond, just because this is a real generational challenge we're dealing with, right? We have to backfill our workforce. We have to bring that next generation in. And so for us this year, it's going to be hitting on a lot of the policies that people who listen to the Association Focus podcast have heard about, right? We're trying to make sure that government programs that support workforce development and training are open to our industry, that are open to paying for the skills that our future workforce needs. So we've got a bill out there that would open Pell Grant money to short-term skills training for the first time. America spends nearly $24 billion a year on Pell Grants. We don't want an extra dime. We just want access to that money. We want people to be able to use their 529 plans for skills training and certifications so that they can, we're moving it from a college savings account to a career savings account, right? Getting people the skills they need to walk into this industry where they're going to have an amazing middle-class career. They're going to be involved in some of the most exciting things in the world and seeing these amazing traveling circuses that show up and that tens of thousands of people come to every single day. We just want to be able to get our workforce ready for that. But one of the things ECA is also going to be doing this year is, listen, we're a partnership of the leading associations in this business. We're going to be working overtime to amplify what they're doing. What EDPA is doing on workforce is fantastic. What ESCA is doing, what IEEE is doing on workforce, all of these organizations together, we need to amplify what each other's doing. We need to get it out there. We need to work in partnership in tandem. So we're going to make sure we're doing everything we can while we're on Capitol Hill, while we're in state houses, just to talk to these leaders about what the industry is doing and how they can help us reach our future talent pool, because that's what's going to matter the most.
Real talk for a second. And I was thinking about this while you were saying all of this. Let's say that things play out on the bills, the two bills that are moving forward for Pell Grant and the other one that finances more tech school, if you will, more trade school type of activity. How long has anybody put a number on how long you think it will take for it to start seeing significant use and a payback for that type of mood? Is it a 5-year tenure? Is it a 10-year tenure? Is it an immediate turnaround going out of the gate?
I think it's going to be much quicker than 5 years for sure. What would happen would, anytime a law is passed, an agency has to pass a regulation that shows how that law is going to be put into effect. We work there too, not just on passing the law, but on making sure the regulation reflects what it needs to. And then from that point in time, the money goes down to the states, and we start working in state houses, and we start working with our partners, whether it's colleges, universities, trade schools, for-profits, everybody who can provide this level of training, and say, hey, we've got gaps here. If you guys can bring these people in and train them, we will partner with you. We will bring these people into our organization, and that'll be our future workforce. So it's a combination of setting them up, but then also working in partnership to make sure we knock them down once the ink's on the law.
Fair enough. Kind of carries me to the second point that you and I talked about off mic of strong focus for ECA in 2024, along with the other 5 points that are listed out very well on your public policy agenda. But the focus would be on state and local activity focus, because you're right. You and me and everyone else who's been involved in ECA have been very, very strong at the federal level for the past few years. But there's a lot in play, i.e. the California emissions type of laws that you had to jump in on and be involved with. I also think of Chicago and the paid leave type of thing that was going to affect attendees and exhibitors going in to do work there. It gets kind of crazy. And then everything in between. I'm not picking on those two, city and state, because they're blue states. I'm just saying those are the ones that happen to be at the forefront. It could be any other state for that matter among the 50. So why, if you could sum up, other than what I just briefly mentioned, is the reasoning for ECA to get more and more involved at the state and local level?
So I think it was Louis Brandeis, the Supreme Court justice, who called states laboratories of democracy. And I think back to my time in science class in high school, and sometimes the experiments worked out the way they were supposed to, and sometimes, I did a good job not to blow up the little lab station I was working with. And I think it's a good enough analogy for the way that we look at what's happening in the states. There's some good stuff happening, and there are some challenging things happening. And as Washington, D.C. has gridlock, and as you see some of the machinations that you see on TV and some of the politics take hold, there's still political activity. There's still lawmaking going on. There's still ordinances being passed. But a lot of that passes out of Washington, D.C. down to states and cities nationwide. And, Mike, you just mentioned it, right? Kentucky, California, Chicago. We've seen everything from taxing exhibitors in Kentucky to we've seen some ideas floated in the Northeast and the Midwest about using convention centers to house migrants who've been bussed up there. So there's all types of issues that happen in states and cities nationwide. And what we have found is that as things have been tougher to do in Washington, D.C., a lot of people are looking at states and cities and outlets to do that. And that means we've had to play a more proactive role down there. And we want to make sure, anybody across the country who listens to this podcast knows the business events industry creates amazing financial benefit for the states and communities we operate in nationwide, right? Whether it's the hotel occupancy taxes, whether it's, the economic spending that happens on restaurants and hotels and Main Street commerce, right? We are a boon to local economies. And I don't think it's unreasonable that we expect to have the red carpet rolled out for the people who are helping these communities nationwide. And that means making sure where there are opportunities to pass laws and to explore ideas that can help benefit and can help communities bring more events in and can help bring more people to their city to spend and, so many destinations use conferences and trade shows as business cards of their community to the entire country and the world, right? This is why something's happening great here in Destination X, and you want to be a part of it. That's how jobs get created. That's how people move. There's a lot of good things can happen there. We're here to amplify those. We want to support those. But at the same point in time, and the Kentucky example is a good one, Chicago example is another good one, where there are ideas, no matter how well-intentioned they might be, where the rubber meets the road, it's going to create something that's going to prevent business events from being successfully hosted in communities. It's our job to raise our hand and say, hey, have you thought about this? Or in some cases, to bang our fist on the table and go, hey, if you do this, there are going to be implications to what you're considering. And we just see more and more of that coming along. It's been some of what you've discussed. We've seen everything from policies that have been proposed in some states that wouldn't let you do business with anybody. Any government couldn't do business with anything involved in a boycott. Well, I don't know. Convention centers are owned by the state. Does that mean they couldn't host their meetings? I don't know. We have to ask those questions. We've seen laws floated where, if a trade show or a conference hired a musician and the musician got on social media and popped off with their views about politics or what was happening in the Middle East or whatever, you couldn't cancel their contract. So what do you do if your exhibitors want to pull out? We believe strongly that those decisions are much better made by the entrepreneurs and small business leaders in this industry and not by bureaucrats at the state capitol. So we're going to continue to keep an eye out for these opportunities. Things will hop up here and there, and we'll be there to make sure that everybody kind of keeps the boat between the buoys and doesn't do anything that's going to harm the conferences and trade shows and the experiential marketing events that drive so much value to these communities.
Let's shift back to a subject that we talked a lot about in 23, Visa. And I'm not talking about the credit card, talking about being able to have people come into our country for live events, shows, and commerce. It's on your agenda, but it seems that maybe it's not at the top or strong as it was before. Is that because it's got to play out at the federal level the way it's going to play out, or you've done it as much as you think you could possibly do to this point?
Oh, it's still up at the top. It is definitely still at the top. I think there's the Visa situation. It's a good news, bad news story. The good news is because of VCA and other groups who've been so actively involved on this, we've made a pretty decent amount of progress this year. China reopened this year. They have never hopped over 120 days in terms of how long it takes to get a visa. That opens the entire Chinese market to come back. In India this year, wait times are down 60%. In Brazil, they're down by more than 75%. So we're making some progress, which is good. What we're focused on is making sure that we can make even more progress. There are some parts of the world, Latin America, Middle East, where interview wait times are still a disaster. In Mexico City, it takes more than 800 days to get a visa interview right now. Not to get a visa, to get the interview to get you the visa.
Jeez.
So that means you've got entire markets that are closed off to event organizers here in the US. And what that means, smaller crowds, smaller exhibit space. You've got international pavilions that are going unfilled. You've got fewer booths being built, fewer contractors to be employed. And it goes all the way down right to the trade show floor. And so what we've talked about is we've had conversations on Capitol Hill, we've had conversations with the State Department, and they're still looking for additional resources to be able to staff up to make sure those wait times come down. And so we're doing what we can in these conversations, particularly around government funding. So when you're looking on the news and you're hearing things about government shutdown and the like, we've got a piece of that. We last fall got some provisions in a bill out of the House of Representatives that will give an extra $300 million to the State Department, one-time deal to deal with visa and passport processing backlogs. We're all in on pushing that as part of FY24 government funding. We've got some other legislation we support that would make some policy changes. Those are a little harder to do here in DC because when you're talking about visas, you're talking about immigration, and you just need to turn on the news to know how productive those conversations tend to be here in the nation's capital. So we are still all in on visas. We're seeing some good news, and that's really great. We want to, congratulate those involved. We want to fan the embers of that, but we need to finish the job too, right? We've got the ball across the 50-yard line. We need to bring it all the way down to the end zone and not do what my beloved Auburn Tigers do, which is more often kick than actually get a touchdown. So,
well, or blow it in the red zone, or we can have that conversation some
it
other time.
hurts.
It hurts. 4th and 31. So a couple of questions before we tie this up. Of course, we're talking with Tommy Goodwin from ECA. Based on the overall public policy agenda, is there anything else that rings in there that we haven't talked about that we need to give some credence to before we move on?
I think we're just looking at a couple other things, particularly around making sure that we continue to keep our post-recovery growth in the industry what it is. We've talked on here before about getting statute on the books that'll go after the hotel scammers, the email list sale scammers that everybody gets peppered with. We're looking to get that across the finish line this year. We're even doing some kind of nuts and bolts things like privacy and music licensing that are going, they're operational issues, but they can be a real thorn in the side of event organizers and venues and others. And so while we've got these big picture issues that we're talking about here, there's a lot under the surface that we're going to be attacking this year to make sure that every time we see a rough edge in the industry, and anytime somebody who listens to this podcast or the alliance partners and associations we work with identify these concerns, anytime we see a rough edge, we want to sand it down. And so we always encourage, I always encourage, folks are hearing something on the trade show floor, get in touch with me, because if you're hearing a scream on the show floor, I don't want it to be a whisper by the time it gets to me here in DC.
Fair enough. And then finally, unless you're under a rock, you already know that 2024 is going to be an extremely political year. It is the headlines that abound, obviously, with Biden and Trump just dominate the news, and Washington, and that's where you live and work. How hard is it going to be this year to do the things that you want to do, knowing this is an election year? Not only is it an election year, but we're seeing some unprecedented legalistic activity, criminal activity at the top of the list on both sides of the agenda that we've never seen before, or if we've had, it's been very limited, but now it seems to be almost profound. What challenge does it look like for you? Do you just have to buck up and just get even stronger and busier and do the best you can in the environment? Or how do you attack this with those outside elements coming in as they are?
It was the great political observer P.J. O'Rourke wrote a book once called "Don't Vote; It Just Encourages the Bastards." And sometimes I feel like that's a pretty good way to look at 2024. But no, to answer your question, the analogy I'll use is another thing that's going to be popping up in 2024, which is the Olympics. And if you've ever watched, my parents growing up, they loved the Olympic diving. And if you ever watch it, they judge by degree of difficulty of how they're jumping off the board and doing their flips and twists and doing all that crazy things they do. Well, we got a very high degree of difficulty this year. Doing things in an election year, doing things in as toxic of a political environment as we are, is very difficult. What it requires is what ECA was set up to do, right? We're here to fight the trench warfare. It's 24/7, 365. It's day by day. It's conversations every single day. It's pushing the agenda of the industry forward. And in DC, we've got an expression, and squeaky wheel gets the grease. And well, I'm here to squeak on behalf of the industry, and it's my job in the face of these challenges you just put forward. We have some policies, whether it's the visas, whether it's workforce, whether it's some of the other things on our agenda that are extraordinarily bipartisan. I'd argue most of them are nonpartisan. They're not political issues. They're something that Democrats and Republicans and independents get behind. And so it's us to sit at the poker table and make our straight and find the right hand that allows us to push these forward. And, visa and workforce are two good examples. I am very hopeful that we're going to get these across the finish line this year, get the hay in the barn, and be able to come back to the industry and say, hey, we've made a real difference on your behalf because of the support you've given us.
I like your poker analogy because, as you and I play poker, and off mic, we were just chatting about this, is you got to get to the point where you're ready to leave, and you get tired of the BS and you just start shoving and try to call bluffs. I don't see ECA as calling bluffs, but I do believe you have to be aggressive in going in there and trying to get that squeaky wheel. You're just going to have to also get a bigger squeaker, maybe this year than in the past.
I mean, the way I look at it, and the way I look at what ECA does, is having been around this industry for a few years, right? the poker analogy I think about is going all in, right? The people who listen to this podcast, the people involved in this industry go all in every day to put on these events. There's a crunch that happens before an event starts where you're down there making miracles happen on the trade show floor, right? You shouldn't expect any less of the people representing you here in Washington, D.C. We got to reflect the ethos of the industry, and we're going to be going all in on these top issues and making sure we're doing every single thing we can on behalf of everybody who's listening to the Exhibitor Now podcast to make sure we're driving and pushing the industry to grow and evolve the way that everybody who listens to this podcast is every day.
It's Tommy Goodwin from the ECA to kick off 2024. Sir, Happy New Year. And I'm sure we're going to be talking also. It would be, I would not be doing credence to mention that just a couple of weeks, we will have our next edition of the Association Focus podcast. So we'll have an update in the next couple of weeks as to what's the latest, how this new agenda activity is moving forward, and of course, whatever develops between now and the next couple of weeks. So we'd love to have you listen to that as well.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys for having me on. Appreciate you for letting me be part of the Association Focus podcast as well. And Happy New Year to all the listeners, coast to coast, border to border.
Let's take a quick break and come back and wrap things up after this.
Are you searching for trade show and event products and services? Find It on Exhibitor Exchange is your complete buyer's guide to trade show exhibiting and events, featuring the trade show industry's top exhibit and display providers. Find It on Exhibitor Exchange is the industry's best shopping and commerce resource for buyers and sellers of exhibit and event products and services. Reaching 20,000 exhibit and event buyers in every print issue of Exhibitor magazine and 140,000 exhibit and event buyers online each year. Search the listings or list your company today. Learn more at exhibitoronline.com/findit.
Great interview, Mike. And again, as you talked about it, we're talking to Tommy on a pretty regular basis, and he's been doing a great job for us as he leads the ECA and helping some of the alliances and the work that we're doing. It was great to hear it for me too, that I know it's now transgressing into a little bit of how we're going to deal with on a state and a local level on what the attention needs to be. And now it gets into the grassroots. Where can we all start getting more involved in workforce and some of these other areas to really make a big difference? So I know that my team and even the local network of EDPA is working on some of these things. So I'm looking forward to what we can do here in 2024.
Yeah, I think it'll be really important for the EDPA local chapters, your individual municipalities where you live, watch and listen to what's going on, because even sometimes laws that are enacted or even being discussed will have a major impact on our industries. Chicago was a big example of that, where they were going to assess taxes on people who are coming in, which was basically a leave law. It was very innocent law, but the way it was worded was actually potentially going to impact exhibitors who would hire coming in for a short period of time for a trade show. So you just never know how the wording might play out and how it'll impact live events, of course, trade shows, experiential marketing, activations, and the such. Speaking of shows, Exhibitor Live right here. I just this week, actually yesterday, today, booked my personal experience. By the way, I found it very easy for me to call Opryland direct at the 615 number. And I got a person there who walked me through everything I needed, because the first call I made was to the toll-free number. And basically, after going through 10 minutes of dissertation, was told, well, you need to call the Opryland Resort direct anyway. So I went, okay, in order to get the Exhibitor Live discount. And it is substantial. So you definitely, you want to take advantage of that negotiated rate staying on site. But yeah, Mark, it's right here, and everybody should be taking advantage of booking now before it gets a little crazy.
Yeah, I agree. We are excited about it. That was one of the calls I had earlier today, as the group meets weekly on the process and the programs and all the elements of it. There's a lot of fun coming in with this, and there's been a lot of excitement. We've got a whole new approach to it. So I think we're building on the standards. The CTSM, I'll tell you, one of the things there that was a news flash, we're just a couple of people short of the CTSM enrollment, basically the end corporate marketers coming from our record year. So, and we're still a few weeks out. So We're on track right now. And the highest mark for this was in 2016, actually. So as we've talked about earlier, we've surpassed 2018 and 2019 pre-COVID, but 2016 was a high part, and we're just a couple of people short of that. So we're anticipating a great show from an end marketer standpoint. Same with the show floor. We've got a lot of things going on there that we're feeling really excited about, from the suppliers being able to come and work with each other on it. And we're trying to bring some new stuff to it. And as everybody knows, again, Jim Gilmore, our chief experience architect, is working with the team on a regular basis too. How do we keep raise the game with this? And you're going to see some this year. We think it's going to be very favorable, but you're going to see even more next year. We're about to list, we've actually got 25, 26, and 27 all wrapped up. And we'll be announcing that soon on the cities that are going to be going forward with that. Exciting news. We're excited about what's going on and look forward to seeing everybody back together again here just in February. It's coming up quick.
Really is coming up quick. It's amazing how, you spend 2 weeks in and out of your office desk if you were like me, but you really weren't focused. You were really in the holiday mode, Christmas, relatives, New Year's. I mean, I DJ'd a gig. So most people know I do DJing until 4:30 in the morning in Alabama across the way here, and realized that I'm way too old for that. But when I got home, and the next morning after New Year's Day, hit my desk, one thing I read, and I think this is kind of important to wrap up on before we tie this up, is that first day, Mark, back at your desk after such a long holiday observation, is probably one of the hardest, because your idea of accomplishment of everything you think you need to do is, and I'm that way, I'm trying to do everything in one day. And man, you just can't do that. You got to realize that there is a tomorrow, at least from a business mind standpoint, and there will be more time that you need to accomplish what you need to accomplish. It's not done in one day. Do you ever have those feelings when you sit back at your desk after a long layoff?
Yeah, no, I had the same feeling. When I came back, you felt overwhelmed, and I worked my tail off that first day, and I didn't feel like I accomplished enough. And it was almost depressing in some ways, but you felt, I was very hard on myself. And like you said, I appreciate your insight on that, because it was hey, then the next day I got more, and now I feel caught up with it already. And back into the flow with what's going on with it. But it's also, we need that break. You need to slow down, read a book, relax. But it's a little bit hard to, you're moving at about 20 miles an hour, and then you got to get back to our 80 or 100 miles an hour that we're going in the business day world. And we do need to be kind to ourselves as we go through that transition, and also expect them. I try to get my team to get ready for that mentality, because our clients are going through it. And then all of a sudden the clients are going crazy that day. Don't take it on, take a breath. We'll work through it. They'll work through it. It'll get fine, and everything will work out. But it is overwhelming. So it's a good way to point out, and we got to make sure we take care of ourselves. And some of us that, are a little bit older and can't go to that 4 o'clock in the morning either too. We got to give ourselves a little extra piece.
Well, and not only that, but it was Central Time. So I live in Eastern Time. So I lost an hour coming home, and I'll share this, and then I'll be quiet. I was literally a mile away from my house, and I was doing good, and it was all back roads coming back. I went the back way, and I got about a mile from my house, and I fell asleep at the wheel. I literally fell asleep, and I ran off the road. I hit thank God for those little rivets, or whatever you call them, ridges in the road. Because as soon as I heard that and it vibrated my body, I was back up. I was a mile away, and all I kept yelling was, stay away, the whole way, the rest of the way home. So, I've learned to not push that boundary. And whatever you're taking that gets you to 20 miles per hour, let me know. I haven't found that yet. I'm still hovering at about 1 to 2 miles per hour. Final thought is next week's show. We will have Emily Ben, the editorial staff, out at CES Live to give us some play-by-play action. Looking forward to that. You'll be having a discussion with them that we've already scheduled. And so we're going to bring back to you all the great things that are going on at CES, which is scheduled for next week. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Emily and Ben come in town Sunday, which is still the setup of the last day of setup and kind of a dark day on the show floor, but there's still some work being done. And then we'll spend the whole week working together on what's new and crazy there. And obviously the award program, and we do our big our issue in the magazine on Best of CES. So I'm looking forward to hearing their insights. I learned a lot from the group editorial team last year, but Ben and Emily have a great insight with it, and we'll see a lot what's happening. So more to come.
Good deal. So we appreciate you listening in on our first edition of the 2024 version of the Exhibitor Now podcast. And we will catch you next week from Las Vegas and play-by-play action, as I said, from CES.
The Exhibitor Now Podcast. Give us 30 minutes, and we'll give you everything you need to know now.